And then he goes on to talk about the qualities that he found in some of those teachers. So the prelude has ended, this ancient Arabian overture. And he starts on the meat of his subject. And he says, فَلِلَّهِ أَقْوَامٌ نَأَى الْبَعْضُ مِنْهُمُ عَنِ الْبَعْضِ إِيثَارًا لِمَقْصُودِ خَلْوَةِ وَأُنْسًا بِمَوْلَاهُمْ وَشُغْلًا بِذِكْرِهِ وَخِدْمَتِهِ فِي كُلِّ حِينٍ وَحَالَةٍ. He says, Allah has peoples, some of whom have been distanced from others because of their choosing khalwa, isolation. This is his first category. And because of their lack of isolation from their Lord, their sense of intimacy with their Mawla, and their preoccupation with remembering Him and serving Him in every time and in every circumstance. وَحِرْصًا عَلَى هَذَا الْخُمُولِ لِأَنَّهُ أَمَانٌ لِأَهْلِ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَرِّ شُهْرَةِ. And because of their determination to remain in this state of obscurity, nobody knows them, because this is a protection for Allah's people from the evils that inhere in fame. وحب اعتزال وانقطاع فإن فيهما طيب عيش في زمان البلية. And their love for isolation, for withdrawal and separation, because in these two qualities may be found the sweetness of life in a time of tribulation. So these 4 lines indicate one of the categories of the pure of heart. And this is a Ghazalian category, to the extent that Imam al-Ghazali dedicates an entire book to this question of uzla, asking one of the most important questions in all Muslim spiritual wayfaring, which is, to what extent should I be alone to seek my Lord, and to what extent should I keep the company of other people? And Imam al-Ghazali's view is that the beginner is unlikely to make spiritual progress if he's in this state of khalwa. The beginner should be in sohbah, because the dinu mu'amala, religion takes place through transactions, encounters, human engagement. This is a collective type of wayfaring. And that through the company of others we are reformed. But we can be reformed or we can be deformed depending on the company we choose to keep. At-tab' as-salim sarraq. The Sufis say the sound temper or the sound nature of human beings is a thief, which means that if a person is good-hearted and innocent, he is also receptive and will be influenced by the company which he keeps. This is particularly evident amongst children, because they have no sophisticated defences against the behaviour and the attitudes that they see around them, and they are very readily caught up in the values and behaviour patterns of their peer group. But it's also the case with adults, and this is human nature. We are influenced by our environment, by the people we are with. And this is one of the dalils for the necessity of tariqah, and one of the secrets in Islamic history concerning the reason why the institution of tariqah evolves relatively late. The Sufis say in early Islam the entire religion was a tariqah. The ordinary Muslims you associated with in the time of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and their successors were, by and large, pure enough for you to be carried forward by their company. But as the inevitable decadence set in, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, the best of generations is my generation, says the hadith, and then those who come after, and then those who come after them. Because of this kind of spiritual entropy that's inevitable in the aftermath of any great spiritual intervention, such as the foundation of a new risala, the commonality of Muslims are no longer able to take us forward. In some cases they may take us back. Concerns for dunya, sectarian divisions, the bubblings and heavings of the ego, all of these things may mean that the Muslim who happens to be beside you in the mosque is not necessarily the person with whom you would wish to socialize in a Sharia fashion. He may have certain tensions, difficulties, complexes that would actually take you backwards. So the solution that was developed by the Ummah was to institute the Tariqah, which is a kind of subset of the Ummah. An attempt not to depart from the way of the Salaf, but to return to it. To recreate a little bubble of the original purity and sense of fellowship and brotherhood that progressively but inevitably had been lost. That's the function of the Tariqah. Now, this principle of khalwa that Imam al-Haddad, following Imam al-Ghazali, is outlining here is something that may be appropriate at certain points of the spiritual path, that the guide may direct his disciple, his murid, to spend some time in a state of isolation. The traditional maximal period is 40 days. The model is, of course, the tahannuth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam on Ghari Hira. And the model is, of course, the practice of i'tikaf. So this is a Sunni principle, but one that has been preserved by the people of Tasawwuf in a more living way than by any other section of the Ummah. And it is also possible for the great saint, because the advantages of sohbah really no longer obtain in his case, because his sohbah is with his Lord, that Allah may, through His mercy, veil him with the veils of khumul, or obscurity, which is what Imam al-Haddad is referring to here. And in this age, it is believed that the majority of the Ahlullah, the people of Allah, are in this state of khumul. They exist, but nobody points them out, nobody knows who they are, because Allah wishes to protect them from the evils and the distractions and the pesterings of the age. There's a story told by the ulama of Istanbul about a truly great saint who lived in a tumble-down lodge, zawiya, tekke, and had only one murid, only one disciple. And the disciple was aware of the greatness of his teacher and felt saddened that the teacher did not have a whole host of disciples, like many of the other shuyukh of Istanbul in his day. And he kept pestering the sheikh to reveal his greatness to everyone so that everybody could benefit. And the sheikh said, if I did that, you would be sorry. Eventually, in order to teach the murid, he gives in. And one day, as they're walking down the street, a child is knocked over by a cart, and the sheikh places his hand on the head of the child, and the child is immediately healed. And everybody looks at this and says, this is a great karama. And that evening, of course, there is 1,000 murids at the feet of the sheikh in the zawiya. Murid is very pleased, feels very proud of himself that he has such a widely revered sheikh. But then as the days go by, he realizes that he has less time with the sheikh, and that he's sitting further and further away from the sheikh, and that the sheikh is being endlessly pestered with little questions about what should I do about my business, and my daughter who wants to get married, and my errant son, and the usual things that people hurl at the shuyukh. And he starts to realize, well, perhaps the old way was better. Perhaps khumul was the appropriate state for my sheikh. And when the sheikh sees this, he goes to the mosque, having prepared an empty bladder, which he puts underneath his arm under his robes. And everybody lines up behind him to pray. And just as he's about to do the takbir, the sheikh squeezes the bladder and it sounds as if he's broken wind. But he continues to pray. And everybody says, A'udhu billah, A'udhu billah, this is haram. And they all run out of the mosque. And that evening, of course, the murid is alone with his sheikh again, having learnt his lesson. Now, this is not the maqam of all of the shuyukh, because it is Allah's will that people shall have variant numbers of disciples, just as was the case with the prophets. Some prophets just had 1 or 2 followers, others had legions. But what Imam al-Haddad is saying here is that basically don't underestimate anybody upon whom your eye might fall, because Allah might be protecting him through certain veils, and he may be one of Allah's friends.